Welcome to Decoding Growth, where unfiltered conversations and bold ideas are reshaping retirement. Each episode cuts through the noise to reveal the strategies and unexpected alliances driving real industry change, one conversation at a time. Here are your hosts, Lisa Kottler and Will Prest.
Welcome to another episode of Decoding Growth, where we talk to the bold innovators in the retirement plan industry, those that are shaking it up. Today, we're going to take maybe a little bit different tack, and we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the report that Will and I published here back in, April, our Next Gen 401k report, and specifically look at kind of the legal and compliance considerations that come with that.
It's going to be a lot of fun, though. It's not just legal and compliance. I'm going to say that it's with one of the industry's best that actually has always helped me think about what are the operational realities and how do we work through those. So we're going to dig into the details. And it does really reflect our map where we highlighted 60 challenger brands. And isn't the exciting thing, Lisa, that we're working on the next iteration of the map, and there's probably going to be 80 or 90. So the industry keeps innovating, the industry keeps growing, but at the same time, everybody's trying to figure out how do we add that to create a competitive edge or grow a marketplace. And we're here to talk with Bonnie around what that means and the operational realities of that and her observation.
Yeah, we couldn't be more thrilled to have Bonnie Treichel joining us today. She's an ERISA attorney, brings a really, unique perspective because she combines practical experience both as an advisor and an attorney, but also really an operator. She's founded and runs not one, but two firms right now. And if you're in the retirement plan industry and don't know her, then you probably don't get out much because she's virtually, at any important major industry conference meeting, Bonnie is probably there speaking, presenting, conducting one of her workshops.
And I think we're there madly taking notes, right? Isn't that what's happening?
So Bonnie, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you.
Awesome. I'm really excited to be here. It's been really fun getting to know you. And Lisa, I've really looked up to you as a mentor for years. It's really nice to be a part of the conversation today. And I am glad, Will, that you qualified. We're going to talk about legal and compliance, but don't tune out. You'll learn something more interesting than compliance and legal today. I'm excited to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Lisa and I didn't have our Series 24 for a long time just for the fun of it. So we're going to put this to the test, right?
Yeah, but I don't have any of those licenses anymore. No, look, as we said in the opening, you do so much. You're on the road all the time. You're running two different firms. You're so busy. So how in the world you did this, I don't know. But I was so thrilled to learn just in the last few days that you've also written a book. And I want to start there because I'm just super excited for you personally. And obviously from a business perspective too, what this could do for you. But I just think it's really so cool. And I would love to start there. Like, how did that come to be? And what can and by the way, I did pre-order my book.
So everybody else get after.
Yes. We'll include a link to that in the show notes for sure. Pre-order also. But I'm super excited about it. But as I said, tell us about that. Like, how did that come to be? And what can we expect? What will we learn from it?
Thank you for pre-ordering. Writing a book is an interesting experience, but it came about, and I'll give two capacities. One is I don't do your traditional goal list every year because I feel like it gets me too tightly constrained to hitting all these targets every year. So one of the things I did a few years ago is I started making my goals more bucketed, like by 35, I'm going to do this, by 40, this, by 50, by 60. So it just is more like broader range goal planning. It's everything from run X marathon to do X with the business to one of the things was write a book. And so then that kind of ties into a little bit more about why I have the business and some of the values that are really part of Endeavor Retirement, which are coming to light in the book. And I had an opportunity with a very dear friend and industry partner who's another innovator, Jamie Hopkins. And the book is not your traditional book. So if you think sketch artist meets financial planning topics, that comes together to be the book. So we found this great illustrator, and it's 125 retirement plan topics. It's called Your Retirement Sketchbook. And think it's a little bit of a workbook. So when we think about our end participant or investor, we want them to be thinking about this arc of everything from their relationship with money, their first money memories. Why do we even engage with money, right? To how do we save? How do we invest? How do we have a retirement income plan? All the way through to living in retirement, things like how are you going to feel in retirement if you're a widow, if you get divorced, to planning for your death, the whole spectrum. And so it's 125 topics organized by those chapters, and each one comes with a sketch to make it more approachable. So that's probably what gets into today's conversation. And again, why I like actually working with both of you so much is the approachable nature of a lot of these topics, right? It's like, it's one thing to have a technical topic and go deep on it, but how do we make it approachable for the people we're working with, be it an advisor or, like in the book's case, our end user? Like, we want people to be able to save and then live happily in retirement.
You know what? I want to follow up on that because our industry is so complex and there's so many layers of complexity that we often forget that ultimately we're designing it for the participant. And it seems like this is a great reminder of the end person, the person that we're working with, and how simple terms like asset allocation or RMD or whatever would just be really confusing to them or just gobbledygook. Is that true? And it helps you feel closer to the industry?
Yeah, I think we get so in the weeds on some of these things, like you said. And again, that's where I think you guys do a good job of translating the things into campaigns for folks and stuff like that. But we don't need to think about a QDIA and a TDF and a this and a that. It's like, how is someone going to take this money they've saved and then pull it out into what is their paycheck on their first day of retirement and their second week of retirement? And is it going to last their whole life? That's what people really care about. And it talks about things like Medicare and Social Security and how these things get taxed in retirement. Very basic things that our end consumer wants to understand. So that's the idea of the sketch, is if we can put a sketch with it, how do we simplify it and make it fun? Here's the simple sketch to help you understand.
I love it. And because that is an area in our industry that we could really improve upon, is creating the simplicity, strip out the jargon, strip out the complexity. In fact, that's one of our trends, is that human-centered design drives engagement. So if you can design things in a simple, intuitive way, and to your point, not use all this jargon, like QDIA, I mean, we have more acronyms, and it's really remarkable, our industry. And look, I know every industry has that. We just seem particularly strong in that area. But speaking of the trends, I do want to. So a couple of months ago, Bonnie, you and I had the opportunity to do a webinar where I came on, because as Will said earlier, we published our map, the Next Gen 401k report. And in that, it was really the trends that we observed in the making of our RetireTech map. So we have 12 trends in there that we've talked about that we see as driving innovation and really what's happening in our industry. And so Bonnie and I, a couple months ago, did this webinar where I talked about some of our trends, and then Bonnie weighed in with her expertise on the compliance and legal aspect of it. And it was just really cool. And I think we got some great feedback. It seemed to be really helpful for folks, because we can talk all about innovation all day long. There's some practical realities here that we have to contend with. So I just thought it was a cool thing. So I assume your game that let's talk about some of those trends, if we will. So I wanted to start with, even though it's not our first trend in the report, but start with collaboration fuels growth. Because this was a cool one too, where you actually, after we did the webinar, did a 3-part series, articles. The first one published, I guess, last week or week before at NapaNet. And you talked about our collaboration fuels growth. And we talk about it in the report because this is really one of the most critical areas. Because if you look at our map of 60 companies, it's just a bunch of logos on a map, right? But what really is important is bringing all that together. Some of those companies need to connect or integrate with one another if we want to create a more orchestrated ecosystem. And they need to collaborate and partner with some of the legacy firms, because the legacy firms have the distribution, the scale, the trust. And these RetireTechs they're nimble and they're innovative. And when you can bring those worlds together, that's where the magic can happen. Now, it's hard to do, but that's really where the magic can happen. Bonnie, talk to us a little bit about what considerations that companies need to be thinking about as they go out and think about collaborating and partnering.
Yeah. And again, I think this is where it's so cool, because you can take what you've done in your work and the trends and the map, and then like, where does this become practical in the ecosystem? You're seeing this collaboration in a lot of different ways. We don't have like clients that I'm working with on some of these things come to me and say, hey, we're going to do something with X. It's, wait, shouldn't you be enemies? Oh, wait, now you're frenemies. And so it is really fun to watch this. I like frenemies is what comes to mind as this comes up more and more, because it is historically some of these firms that you'd think, hey, they would never work together. There you have record keepers who are actually partnering with other record keepers because maybe one market segment versus another, and they can find that collaboration works. Other instances where this works, there's all kinds of ways that this comes up, sometimes on different investment solutions and things like that. Maybe at the 50,000 foot view, one of the things I would say is good neighbors make good fences, I think is the saying. I think sometimes we don't want to over lawyer things. I'm not a believer in over lawyering, because if you spend too much on your legal fees and your deal or your collaboration's not even worth that, okay, that doesn't make sense. But you at least want to have some understanding between the parties. And that could be when you're trading some sort of money between the two parties. It could just be because you just need to have kind of your bullet points down on paper to make sure both parties understand what they've agreed to. And so it's this idea of maybe having some sort of cooperation or collaboration agreement or memorandum of understanding. When you've got two parties in some of these different, and I'm guessing you'll talk more about some of these collaborations, but it exists in a lot of different formats, but really making sure the parties both, it could be multiple parties, they understand, hey, how are we coming together? And what are the terms of this arrangement? Again, I don't think they have to be overdone, but a big place it comes up too is in the sharing of data and information. Because when you think about privacy issues, when you think about cyber issues, those are the types of things where you might have as one party something in your contracts to clients that requires you to do X or Y. And if you don't get that as like a guarantee or something with the person you're collaborating with, you could be putting yourself at risk because you already said, hey, client, we'll agree to do X, but you didn't get it on the other side. Now you're sharing data from your client or something like that. No harm intended, but again, you just have to be careful. And I think it's everything from data, confidentiality, privacy, probably even some basics around marketing and intellectual property. Again, everyone's well-intentioned, but how is someone going to use one another's mark? Or when are we going to do that joint press release about this collaboration? I think all those things can be helpful.
Is there a common thing that you see? First, I love the term over lawyering. I haven't heard that term, but I like that term. And having grown up with a father as an attorney, I get that. Great term. Is there like a common error that you see that you're helping to correct every time that would be great for the audience?
I think that you asked for one. I'm going to give you two. So that's probably
Two's allowed. That's like extra credit.
Or that's not exactly answering the question. I think the two big things that I see are just a misunderstanding of you enter into client contracts and it's around the use of like people's data, right? Or privacy. So you've basically said in your contract with your client, you're going to hold to XYZ standard. But then on the other side of that, you're not actually doing that when you agree, maybe even not in an agreement, and then you give that information to one of your collaboration partners. That's probably the biggest thing I'm seeing. But we agreed to do this and no harm, no foul. And I think you just have to have it in writing. Hey, they're going to protect the data to the extent of X, which is the same standard that's in your agreement with the client. I think that's probably the biggest one, if that makes sense.
That does. Thanks.
One of the biggest challenges we see when you are trying to get the techs and the enterprise firms to partner together is that, and I understand it because these legacy firms have a lot at risk, and I get it. You need to mitigate that and you need to protect, and I certainly understand it. But the way they approach these partnerships often, and I've been on the startup side trying to answer the due diligence for these large firms, and it will just bury you as a startup. It is so much work to go through and it can take months and you don't have the resources as a startup. Not like you have a whole team. You can go say, hey, go answer this questionnaire and all this due diligence. That is one of the really frustrating parts I want to figure out. And maybe it's attorneys like you who try not to overly lawyer, how we can get them to come together, have the enterprise firms still get what they need, but not bury these firms, these RetireTechs and these founders who are just trying to survive day to day. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Is there like a bridge or a light way to do it or a safe way to do it in like a pilot or test license? Or
that's actually an interesting, none of this is legal advice, by the way.
We will all the disclosures we need to, we'll do it.
I think, so those are both really good points because I'm thinking of some of these where I've seen both sides of this. And you get the one firm that's got its 60-page standard agreement. And I'll give an example too. They've got insurance requirements that are just so stringent. I'm guessing you've seen that in kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, they treat us like Verizon. I'm like, I don't need $10 million worth of insurance for our team.
Correct. And so it is trying to maybe, I like that idea, Will, of can you get them to agree to a pilot? Can you work on things like you're going to provide X? Again, there's probably got to be some ways to structure this, but like in a pilot program, in an environment where there's some limits up to your insurance and you're going to provide evidence of your insurance and thinking about getting on. One thing I'll just say that's really practical in nature. Don't just share red lines back and forth. If you can find a way to get the attorneys to talk or get on the phone as opposed to this, like just sharing back and forth red lines, I feel like a lot gets lost because you have someone far removed who's back in legal who doesn't even understand the arrangement. And so when you can actually help understand Will, to your point, like who is your team? What data are you actually accessing? What are you actually doing? You can rein it in and not use like a standard service agreement. Use something more like a cooperation agreement, a memorandum of understanding on a pilot program to try it out at first, and then later go to the full-blown thing.
That's great. And in fact, in some of the market messaging and branding work we've done that go into the ether, so there has to be compliance. So we'll often say, let's just bring the compliance people in early because we found the same thing, the redlining back and forth. We just want to do it right first. So it's much better if you have that little bit of education, even if they can't promise it's final till they see the final. So I love that idea, and I've found that's working. Could we shift to one of our other trends? One of the hottest trends out there is AI and how it's powering the future. And there is a lot of excitement and there's a lot of trepidation. There's so many upsides and super cool hacks and things that you can do, and hacks in a positive way, not a black hat way. But I wonder what your take is. And again, if you think back to our RetireTech map, we identified 60 companies. Many of them have AI as a component or are infused with AI or use it in very interesting ways or augment the software system that they have. How do you think about large enterprises thinking about partnering with a new vendor that talks about how it uses AI capabilities? And we have some follow-ups for it.
Yeah, I think so. Where I'll start is I went to an interesting event recently, and it was on the future of financial advice in 2030 and beyond. And it was not titled AI in 2030 and beyond, but the whole thing was centered around how that is going. It was 50 people in wealth and retirement at this session, and it had everything from very large firms to small firms to tech providers, some compliance, some legal. But AI is here. And I think one of my perspectives was it's going to cause the split of where you see like it's here and it's not going away. And like you said, there's cool hacks. There's great things you can do. You've got to put the bumpers on or the guardrail. That is absolutely required. There's still going to be compliance requirements, legal requirements, disclosure to your clients that you're using it. And we can talk more about that. But I think you really have to be thoughtful about to just say shutting it down, no, we're not going to do it, or here's our 100-page disclaimer to our standard agreement about how you can't use AI. I don't think that survives going forward. I just think that is not going to work. There has to be a workable way because the independent firms are going to find ways to be able to use it, put it in their agreements. I think that firms will run faster because of it. So it's how can we work on coming together to do that? And back to the prayer trend in a collaborative way, I just think it's here. And so it's really coming up with what are the proper guardrails and bumpers to put it in place.
And Lisa, myself, and our team have done quite a bit with AI, and we're working with some clients. And I think you can't be general. When working with them, we have gotten very clear on who is the audience and how are we helping, what problem are we solving for. And then there's all kinds of guardrails. So we can help you bring great efficiency, but it's a back office efficiency, and there's a human in the loop. So there's all kinds of rules where suddenly, I'm just creating more efficiency. Or one of the new tech firms on our map, Planport, it can slash plan conversions by timing and cost by 80%. It's like the coolest tool, but it's actually a combination of just really smart software and AI that can gather and just process information a lot faster and then serve as a tool. So can you talk about the audiences a little bit or go a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I was going to say, I like how you said that because I think, and I'll say this too, from the lawyer hat, right, are my people. In the lawyer world, what we do if we don't maybe know something, or maybe this is just something I think that is the perception of lawyers. It's if we don't know or we don't know enough, we put every disclaimer out there so that we're covered. That's the inclination. I think to your point, as lawyers can get more educated, as the different audiences can get more educated, learning from the great things that both of you are doing, that's going to be helpful to then say, oh, we don't need the 20-page disclaimer. We could actually go with the 2 because we understand what we're actually putting our guardrails on or what we're disclaiming in our agreements or that sort of thing. So like the way I've been talking to some advisors about it is we have different audiences, right? We have our plan sponsor audience. We have our end consumer, like investor or participant audience. We have, if we're thinking about this and we're an advisor, we've got our home office requirements or our broker dealer requirements we might be associated with, right? We've got our regulatory audience. So we've got these different requirements or audiences that we have to think through. So when we just think, does AI jive with these things? It also depends on, Will, to your point, like what's the tool or resource we're trying to use? Are we hitting record on a meeting and then creating a transcription on a one-on-one participant meeting or investor meeting? Or that's very different than saying, actually, I'm going to take this client's plan document or question, put it into some open source chat GPT and put what would otherwise be confidential information out on the web. Like those are different use cases and those have different ramifications. So I think it's just about really understanding what tool or resource are you using? Is it approved? How can you actually be thoughtful about getting, let's say we're talking about a plan sponsor, right? Do we have permission or have we disclosed what tool or resource we're using from some sort of AI capability if it's got a direct impact on that client? We probably don't need to disclose if we're just using something in the background to become more efficient with our job that a human is still doing, with the exception of investment advice. That's different if we no longer have a human giving investment advice.
We use that as an example of we would never work on a process, a series of tools, and then just send it directly to a consumer or participant. I mean, that there's so many problems with that, but there are so many other uses where you can narrow it in. And either the company and the tool is a great application, or you can customize ways to use it for, again, the home office or an advisor on very low, more administrative, repeatable tasks that you could just gain efficiency on. I know regulation isn't common sense, but generally using your common sense, you're going to shrink the risk window.
Yeah. Yep. I think that makes great sense. And it's thinking about who's our audience, what is it we're doing? Do we have permission to do that? And then do we have any other kind of regulatory overlay that we have to be thinking about, considering which regulatory body applies to us based on which activity or account we're in?
So I guess it's always audience and use with all those other things layered.
I hope a lot of attorneys look at it in the way that you do, Bonnie, because we've been out doing a lot of different presentations over the last probably year and a half or a little over a year on AI and showing folks how to use it, different use cases, how to apply it, how to create efficiencies, how to use it for sales, marketing, et cetera. Every time, and we've been in front of a wide variety of audiences, from folks that client services, that working at the record keepers that do client services. We've been in front of plan advisors. We've been in front of TPAs, on and on. And almost every time when there's frustration among them about being able to use it at work, it is always about legal is not allowing us to do it. And which, again, I understand the risk and all that. But to your point at the very beginning of this part of the conversation, Bonnie, you said it's here and it's here to stay and it's only going to gain more traction. And so it really is incumbent upon all of us to figure out how to do it and how to do it well and put those guardrails in, because it's going to happen. People are going to be using it. And so, yeah, hopefully we can get to that stage.
I really believe that it's the education component that's going to be helpful, because just saying no, my firm belief is that just saying no actually is not the answer, because you know that advisors, for example, they'll still do it anyways. They'll just do it on their personal computer or something. That's an extreme example, but saying no without saying, let's get educated and figure out our proper guardrails, it's not going to go away. It's not like this is a fad or a trend it's hit for a couple of years and now there it goes. It's here. And it's going to continue to progress, I think, and create many more efficiencies that I probably cannot even imagine. I'm sure both of you can. But so it's really just getting educated for our clients, everyone in the ecosystem, including chief compliance officers, lawyers, so that we can better understand how to create those guardrails and bumpers.
I'm glad you said that because that kind of fits with the programs we've been helping other large firms develop on their behalf that are, in essence, educational value added. Is we have a basic risk framework so we can cut it down to the things that will really drive efficiency and value, but really have little to no compliance concerns. And let's just start there and get really good at that and get really comfortable and realize, and you still have to, what tool you're using and what information you're putting in there, and start with just the basic programs because everybody needs to get really comfortable with it. It's the people that aren't comfortable with it or the businesses that aren't comfortable with it that are going to be put out of business by Gen AI just getting better and better.
It's coming. And look, lawyers are using it too, because there's all kinds of different use cases for lawyers to be more efficient. And at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for many of us too, in whatever industry you're in, to help with issues. You're saving costs. I don't think it puts humans out of a job. I think it allows us to spend more time doing other things, but it's not doing some of those, like you said, I think basic routine tasks that are
routine stuff. You have to keep doing the same stuff. And if you really look at one of the things we do is you just inventory your day and your work. A lot of stuff you can make easier or automate.
Just to put a bow on it, there's a quote that we have in one of our presentations that it's from this AI expert, this world leader. And he says, in the next decade, there will be two types of companies: those who fully embrace AI and those who are no longer around. So they better get on the bandwagon, right? So let's shift gears a little bit. And one of the other trends that we had, which in some ways ties a little bit to the collaboration fuels growth trend, is another trend that we identified as embedded solutions transform access and automation. In other words, to the degree that one of these RetireTechs can actually embed itself into the everyday workflows within the legacy providers, then that's just an incredible place for them to be able to get, and it can really help both. And you see this sometimes bundling retirement, say, with payroll and benefits and maybe even some of the wealth management areas. Talk to us a little bit about, and I realize it probably overlaps a little bit with the collaboration, but talk to us a little bit about embedded solutions and what folks need to be thinking about there.
Yeah, so I think where I'll lean into there is for the collaboration piece. We talked about the agreement between the parties who are collaborating. When I think about the embedded solutions piece, the thing that jumps out to me is really making sure, again, our end consumer understands, I'm going to say, conflicts of interest. And there's other things we should think about there too, but from like the compliance and legal perspective, particularly, I know this comes up both on the wealth side, but also really on the retirement side. This is where people are going to totally tune out. When we say conflicts, we're thinking of, if you're on the retirement side and you're in your ERISA world, we know if you are acting as a fiduciary, I can't tell you how many of these issues I've seen come up recently where it's like, well, you're probably triggering a prohibited transaction. Do you have an exemption for that? And so it's this idea of if you're doing things that create a prohibited transaction, again, we don't have to get in the weeds on that, but some of these embedded solutions where maybe it's like you're increasing your own fees by virtue of your fiduciary relationship there's some potential for, let's just keep it light and say, conflicts of interest. And are we making sure that we're following the rules, that we're properly disclosing, that we've got associated exemptions if we have prohibited transactions? I think that's where that can go astray, or even just at a minimum, making sure our clients, either the plan sponsor or our end participant, knows, hey, is this really my person I'm getting it from, or is this some other embedded solution within a solution where it's not really the person I thought I was getting, it's through someone else that I'm actually getting this service. And so there's a few tentacles there, but that's the high level.
Okay. You are so dynamic. We're switching to a completely different topic. You ready? One of the hottest things out there and projects, we're working on is you can't go to a conference or a large meeting without people talking about privates and alternatives and even crypto. Crypto is a real thing. For us all, integrates cryptocurrency into its offerings. So could you talk about the rise of crypto and the rise of alternate investments, and maybe start with alts and privates and then go to crypto? There's a whole raft of issues. We'd love your take on that and what's real and what's folklore in the media that may be misleading.
There's a whole raft of issues, but I would say, I like how you said folklore in the media, because I think one of the misconceptions, did I say that right? Misperceptions is not the vocab expert. One of the things that people I think are seeing sometimes in more like, maybe it's more mainstream media than specific retirement industry trade press, is this notion that, hey, for alternatives to come to 401k plans, this is, I'm going to say, dangerous for participants. And what I mean by that is we know that the privates, private equity, private credit, these sorts of things, defined benefit plans have had this for years.
This is what GM and IBM and GE have been doing for decades.
And again, there's pros and cons to that, but we've had it on the DB side for years. Those plan sponsors and the advisors who have had DB experience, they're used to that. Now we transition to the DC side, or rather the 401k side. And this came up around 2020 and 2021 a little bit when there were a series of letters from the Department of Labor on this topic. And it was getting some traction. And I think it's coming back up again, not that we've had any new guidance, nothing new from the Department of Labor, though I do think we might see something. I would anticipate, again, don't quote me on this, I know this is recorded. I do think under this administration's DOL, it wouldn't surprise me if we got some sort of guidance on alternatives. And I'll talk about crypto separately here in a minute. But I do think in 401k plans, you will continue to see this pick up a little bit. The basics of what's allowed, for example, if you go back to that 2021 clarifying letter from the DOL, does not say, hey, you can't have private equity in a retirement plan. You still have to follow your same prudent process. What they clarify is that when it's a component of, I think they say mixed asset alternative, i.e., a model, a target date fund, a managed account, when a private is a part of that, or an alternative is a component of something else that is managed by like a 338, then so long as that's the case, follow a prudent process, and you can have that in a retirement plan. And there was just a large case in the Ninth Circuit that had gone on where they included hedge funds and private equity as a part of the target date funds. And it was in their IPS, and they won on that case. I think we could go on this, but it's coming. It's here. It's going to get more traction. And the Department of Labor does not say you can't do it. The folklore piece of this is that I think the perception is like, hey, most of these privates are going to show up on the investment menu where someone could put 100% of their retirement plan in a hedge fund or something like that.
Going to happen though, right?
No,
The fiduciaries are going to, I'm sure, limit it, aren't they?
and I think it's going to typically come up as part of a target date fund.
And that's right. It's going to be a sleep and it will be managed. And then that's doable.
It's not like it's going to become, I'll call it a designated investment alternative or a single option on the plan where someone's just, yep.
Let it ride. That's not possible. But it can be part of, it's almost like picking managers, like a manager of managers is it sits inside a target date fund or other vehicle.
I think that's how it's going to most likely come up. Now, the rules don't say it can't be an option on the menu. I have not seen that at all. And I don't think that's the case. But that's how it's coming up in the media from what I've seen, is like, that's the frightening thing for participants.
Yeah. We've seen some very senior management kind of talk about it pretty publicly in the media, haven't we? So that's been fun.
All right, crypto. That's because I'm very Bitcoin. I'm not interested in other crypto. Very much a Bitcoin person. But yeah, I would love to hear what you have to say about how that's going to play out.
Yeah. So I'll just echo the same thing I said about the boring as a record, like Section 404 of ERISA. You got to follow your prudent process. Doesn't matter if it's a large cap growth fund, doesn't matter if it's private equity, doesn't matter if it's crypto. You're looking at the needs of the plan and its participants. You follow your prudent process. You can do that if it's crypto. That being said, there was all the attention previously with the compliance assistance release that had previously come out, and the attention was on essentially the DOL targeting crypto and saying, if you have this in your plan, we're going to focus on you, even if you have it in your brokerage account. They later walked back orally the brokerage account piece of it, but still the other compliance assistance release was hanging out there from 2022. Now fast forward to some of the guidance we have this year, which includes compliance assistance release 2025-01, which again, I'll go back to the kind of misleading headlines. Some of the headlines make it seem like, oh, the DOL is promoting crypto. The DOL is not promoting crypto. They're going back to, very clearly, they said their neutral stance. So they rescinded the prior compliance assistance release. So it's just not there anymore. And this is just saying, again, follow a process. They're not promoting it. They're not targeting you if you have it. You can go either way, follow a prudent process. So we're in a neutral position from a regulatory side at this point.
Yeah. Hopefully we can make some progress and I imagine with the current administration, that'll probably happen. But the Bitcoin ETFs exploded. And we could do a whole episode just on Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. I would love that. I don't know if other people would, but I find it interesting. We just have a few minutes left, and I do want to hit one other trend. And this is our trend was called legislation sparks new opportunities, which sounds crazy. Like what any sort of law or regulation is going to actually spark innovation, but it did, because I was actually at a startup myself where I helped build a startup that was really founded on because of the first Secure Act 2019, because it created PEPs. And we created digital PEP. And so it really can have an impact. And I would be remiss to not bring this up because I know we just had some interesting developments as it relates to PEPs this week. So would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think so. Given my world of following legislation and regulation, I love this trend because it does, for me, a couple of examples, both with PEPs or pooled employer plans, which is this concept of
The acronym.
just this idea of grouping together small or it could be larger employers to offload. I think the concept right at the heart of this is how do we offload responsibility from a small employer into someone that is called a pooled plan provider or P3 or PPP, whatever you want to call it. But how do we say, hey, you're a small employer, you're making widgets, you can come together with others and have a single plan essentially and give all that work to someone else, and you can just make sure your people are covered. That's the basic explanation of that. And to your point, Lisa, Secure Act of 2019 and then followed on by Secure 2.0 really did promote these ideas like PEPs, also retirement income solutions. They went crazy after this, and it's really helping with these types of things. Even this week, we got some new guidance related to PEPs. Lisa, as you just mentioned, part one is a little bit of guidance, but then the other is really an RFI or request from information, and it's got 60 days. Anyone can respond to these. So when the department puts these out, anyone can fill out their comments and say, here's the pro, here's the con, here's how it impacts savers, that sort of thing. So I would encourage anyone listening to respond with their thoughts. You turn that into the Department of Labor. And the idea here with this RFI and guidance is, should there basically be more of an ability to shift responsibility to this pooled plan provider, to offload burden from the employer to the pooled plan provider? And so again, it's really getting at more promotion of PEPs and have PEPs really picked up enough to really get the coverage that we need for Americans to have access.
So any betting thoughts on where we go with PEPs? Like we've seen some of in fact, I don't know that Nevin actually predicted, I guess Fred did, in terms of where he sees PEPs going, but just curious, you want to throw your hat in the ring. Did Fred say at least 50% of plans are going to be in PEPs in the next 5 years or something? I don't remember exactly, but
I think that's optimistic. It's not that I don't believe in the concept. I think there is still a perception from a lot that, hey, if I join this PEP, I'm giving up something that's unique to me, and I don't want to do that. I also think that there's like operational challenges that some folks have faced. Hey, once I'm in it, what happens if I need to get out of it for a certain reason? And how does that work? So I think, yes, Fred had a strong prediction about them. I don't share as rosy of a prediction. I'm all about coverage. And one of the things I've been interested in is, can you do something similar, but sometimes have more aggregation for some of the same reasons and get the same thing out of it without actually having the PEP? I know there's reasons for and against that. I just am not certain it's going to be quite as strong of an uptake that fast.
Beyond PEPs, do you see any other legislative tailwinds or headwinds that are going to help or hurt innovation?
Oh, good question. I do think we'll continue to see more that's promoting the issue of coverage. So not just PEPs, but more about if we look forward to a Secure 3.0. I think we're going to see more that is continuing to lean into tax credits so that people will start plans. I think when we look at like age of eligibility. There was some legislation introduced that would take eligibility age from 21 down to 18. So this idea of, again, how can we just get more people covered to be able to save? I think that's absolutely going to continue to be something that future legislation, it wouldn't surprise me from an auto enroll perspective to see that continue to progress in a Secure 3.0. I think that has operational, but I do think instead of just saying, hey, this is for new plans, I could see potential that would be more expanded to some existing plans, but I could be wrong. Again, it's more about how do we get people covered in savings. So I think that's one thing that is going to just continue, I think, to be on the radar.
Well, 9 out of 10 employers still do not offer a 401k plan today. I'm with you on that. We've got to improve coverage. Bonnie, this has been just fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been incredibly valuable and really love hearing your thoughts because we know that there's a lot of innovation happening, a lot going on out there, but we have to understand the practicality of it and how that we can come together and really drive that. So thank you for all your thoughtful comments and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing with the map and really just creating the map for me. It creates a single snapshot of awareness and then it gives a jumping off point to really create more innovation, right? So I love that snapshot to be able to iterate from there. I think that's awesome.
Thanks for saying that. The impetus to the whole thing was, what can we think about and write about that would help the industry just get bigger and do better? That's the whole reason for the map. And innovation and solving access and participation and retirement income is where we wanted to take it. So thanks for your thoughts on it. And what do you think, Lisa? It's like fun with ERISA, but it was more practical.
Yes. Bonnie makes it interesting. Even when you're throwing out your section this and whatever codes you got going there. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And to the audience, remember you can go get Bonnie's book. And it is available for pre-sale on Amazon. We'll put the link in the show notes and go get it. It'll be available in March 2026. Super excited. And the articles that we talked about, we'll make sure to include those, the links to those, as well as to our map and to the report. So thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to Decoding Growth. And we'll see you next time.
See y'all.
Decoding growth isn't just talk, it's insight, action, and shared wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, share your insights and join the conversation. Subscribe, rate, review, and spread the word. Thanks for listening. See you next time.